and then Christianity morphed into whiteness. What are you all's thoughts on the conflation of being white and being Christian?
So I saw a post on social media. White woman is at a Black Lives Matter rally, and she has a poster board that says there are no white people in the Bible. I want you to digest your Christianity to understand truth. And then she said, Black Lives Matter.
Mm.
There, his name escapes me. I can see his face. His name is Matt King Carter. Long rest his soul. Preached a message years ago called Jesus, that nigga from Nazareth. And the whole template of him being a nigga from Nazareth highlights all of the marginalization, the economic circumstance, and he hangs his hat on the fact that they send Mary and her husband to hide in Egypt. And if you're going to send somebody to hide in Egypt, you would obviously not send somebody white to be hiding in Egypt. Within that reality, it is a major ode of respect that we pay to white people when we as Black people say, what Christianity or what Christ did we serve before the white man brought Christianity to us? Because it immediately implies that we haven't read. And even if we read, whiteness has made us illiterate. So within this moment, the question has to be, how powerful do white people in their whiteness see Black people that they will turn the entire Bible white so that they don't have to serve somebody that's powerful that they see as Black? And it will force us to have the conversation in whiteness. What's the fear of power that you don't control? Because of the fact that the underlying theme of whiteness is power. The challenge has to be, if the God you serve doesn't look like you, can power still be your motif? And if we serve a Christ that gets up on Sunday morning with all power, and you want to marginalize it to whiteness, are you Christian, or are you afraid of power that doesn't look like you?
Well, now.
And we now have to change the motif from it being white power to it being white discomfort. Because the whole movement is not about, the KKK is not a white power movement in all reality. They are a white discomfort movement that is seeking power that they don't feel they have. And we've
because
got
of an inferiority, because of a feeling of
yeah. So Christ puts us all on the same level, and if that is how you totally feel about it, what you are immediately saying is, I don't respect Christ's decision to make us equal. Number two, I don't respect Christ's power because I desire to be more powerful than he. And thirdly, I don't respect the ability for God to give me validation in places that I'm invalid. If those are your three statements, welcome to being Black. Simply because of the fact that despite all of the inferiority, despite all of the power you took from me, despite the voice you marginalized me from, I still love God. I still achieve. I still see myself as valuable. Let me share the God that I serve with the God that you're trying to create, and maybe we can get on the same page. So I think that in that context, we need to shift it from being this whitewashed Christianity to really having a conversation about God and not just about inferior power.
Mm, mm,
Hmm.
Anybody else? Anybody else?
I just
Whiteness
want to
and
say that was
Christianity.
good, sir. That was good.
Oh yes,
That was-
plenty of nuggets were dropped in that.
yes, sir.
That's
Kervance,
a
was your
12 piece right
question,
there.
Kervance, was the question you asked, what do you fear about power you don't control?
Yes.
Yes.
Jesus.
I mean, that is the epitome of whiteness.
Yeah.
It is fearing power I cannot control. I mean, go back to the marching band thing. That's what that was about. The way that we march is the right way. And so we want to control what the right way is. So I'm going to shame other ways of marching. And
Yeah, and the crazy part about that, Nikki, is once a year in almost every HBCU that has a solid football team and a solid band, a major white team will invite HBCU as their first game of the year.
okay.
So that number one, they can get the win on their record. Pay for the win to make them feel like you came up to a level that your conference doesn't constitute. And then thirdly, be entertained by a band that you can't intimidate or you can't duplicate.
Yep.
That whole argument is whiteness at its greatest, because we always want to, white people in their whiteness want to make sure that they get a win that they paid for on the backs of people that they marginalize, to be entertained by people that they can't duplicate. And within that reality,
Damn.
this is what whiteness does. It continues, even in Christianity, to get a win by paying for it, getting entertained by it, and then being minimized because they can't duplicate it. This is the whole argument of the black preaching moment. This is the whole argument of black worship. This is the whole argument of black praise. And now I have to be a multicultural church. I have to make sure that I find me a Dennis Leonard who wears the look, who looks this way, and no knock on him. But this now makes the transition that I can purchase an environment, a culture, and a vibe. This is what happens in hip hop. As much as we laud Eminem, and I think he's a great rapper, a great lyricist, there are 100 Eminems that are black that never get a voice. And because it's so normal that black people rap, but it's so abnormal to have a white person that is lyrically sound, we laud this person in the top 3% of every rapper since 1975. It's the ability to purchase a win that you weren't able to get on your own, get entertained, then marginalize it simply because you can't imitate it. This is the challenge of whiteness in every space that whiteness allows itself to endure and fill up. And we go back to the fact that it's power that you can't control.
You just reminded me of a story that my preaching professor talked about. His name is Brett Younger, white guy who now pastors in New York. And he talked about a time where his predominantly white church, I should probably say exclusively white church that he pastored, will go in fellowship with the black church across town to, create some form of unity. Sometimes the black church will come to the white church's building, and then sometimes the white church will go to the black church's building. So he said one time he took his church over to the black church building and he preached. And he said the worship experience was so dynamic. And the preaching moment was like nothing he or his church had ever experienced. And he just said it was powerful. The spirit was moving. Like the energy was on a different level than anybody in his church experienced. And his white church members, after it was over, came to him and said, well, you never preached like that to us. And he said to them, well, you never talk back to me the way they do. So it's like white people in some instances really desire to have that black church experience, but don't want to have to acknowledge that in some aspects, that experience is somewhat superior to what you've been doing, because you feel a different type of energy in that experience. And that is something you can't control. So as much as you want to have that experience, you don't want to have to acknowledge, I'm not the purveyor of that. I am not the creator of that. So like, we see it all the time. Christianity and whiteness. Go ahead.
Yeah. So much to unpack. I think you get in a similar way that the site of Jesus's body, the SITE site of Jesus' body, is like the intersection, the nexus of humanity and divinity. I think the body of Constantine in 300 is the nexus of Christianity and whiteness. Obviously, whiteness didn't exist, but empire, domination, exploitation, manipulation, etc. You get that merger, and then I think the table is set for the next. I mean, some people argue we might be in a post-Constantinian Christianity now, because the locus of Christianity is now in the global South and the Pentecostal movement. Some people argue that, but since 300 until maybe today, we have been in a Constantinian Christianity, which is the manipulation and the co-opting of Christianity to advance an empire. At one time was just specifically Rome, but since then it's been Rome and Spain and Portugal and France and Germany and America and Canada and etc. The entire Western world is just operating by that script that was written by one emperor in 300. So I think that,
I think we lost Grayson. While Grayson is working out the kinks. Anybody?
Appalachia? Is that why? Where is it?
Hey, I think he's in Atlanta. While he's working out the kinks. Anybody else? Karima, you got something on whiteness and Christianity?
So I got two things. Number one, if you want to talk about white church, black church, I got you all day.
All right.
He's in black church, but had to leave black church because my experience at the time, my family life at the time, did not match black church. And then what I mean was, my husband and I was a stay-at-home mom. I had all these kids, right? I had a large family, six kids. I was homeschooling. And so at my black church, I'm wanting to bring this experience into black church, asking my pastor, can we have a mom support group? People at the black church telling me and my husband, what you gonna have all them children for? When you gonna send her back to work? Because the experience in that urban environment did not match what my family looked like and our experience. And so everything that I wanted to do, everything that we were, was in contradiction of the culture of the black church. So I had to find where my family fit. And at that time, my family fit in the white church. So I go to visit the white church and I see spaces dedicated to children. So much so that I'm questioning, do they have, a school or something? Because they have all of these rooms and that's just for Sunday school. I go to the white church and I see family sizes that mirror mine. I go to the white church and people are homeschooling. It's more of a family-centered ministry versus the urban black church that didn't have that. So we made the migration. And in making that migration, my family life was fed, but I sacrificed my culture in order to receive what my family needed at that time.
Mm.
And then there's all that happened inside of my experience of white church, right? The pastor didn't have a parking space label for him. He parked his car next to mine and walked into the church. I could call him Pastor Jeff or Jeff. It didn't have to be, this bishop such and such and this huge long, label. His wife, they didn't even understand what first lady, first family. They didn't have none of that. She was in the back changing my child's behind. And she told me, she said, no, you go sit in service with your husband because as a mama, you need this break. I'll watch your baby.
Wow.
She was sitting in the front row in some hat and untouchable. She was in the back pushing babies in the stroller. So my whole entire Black church, white church experience unpacks all of it. But then at the white church, of course, now they don't see me and my Blackness. They just see me as a good Christian sister. So when in society, when Black children and Black men are shot and killed by police, I hear nothing. I hear crickets. There is silence from the white church because their culture isn't my culture. So now I'm caught. I'm betwixt and between two worlds, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I'm tired. I'm tired of all of it. I am tired of trying to fit into someone else's definition of what is right. Or even when it comes to the gospel, just let the gospel be the gospel, regardless of the color of the lips that are preaching the gospel, Black or white. I just want, as a person who believes in God, I want the experience of me and God purely, without having to fit into, okay, so then when I left the white church and I tried to go back into somewhat of a Black church that kind of acted white a little bit kind of experience, okay, it was confusing. And I'm tired of all of that. So right now, I'm at this real sweet spot where it is me and my humanity with God and God's divinity, period. I'm not trying to clap on the ones and the threes or the twos and the fours. I'm trying to be a person created in God's image and experiencing that relationship, separate and distant from what white people think and from what Black people think, because I'm tired. And at 40 damn 5, I ain't got the time nor the energy to be appeasing to anybody else but me and the God that created me. Here.
Come on now.
I agree with everything that you said, Karima, except this one point. God definitely claps on 2 and 4. God claps on 2 and 4. I don't care what anybody says. God claps on 2 and 4.
And he double claps sometimes if the beats per minute get up.
I like thunder goes with the lightning, right? To come together. Oh, can I throw something in here? And I want to, Blake, put a question in the comments. So somebody throw that up there. But I have wondered that exact same thing. Why do us in Black churches uplift titles so much? And I think it goes back to the idea of power structures.
It does.
Right? We don't experience power in any other place in the world. So then we come into our Black churches and we've got to figure out a way to embrace power in some way. So we then give ourselves titles and names and positions so that we can then have authority in places where we have never had authority before. The reason Pastor Jeff doesn't have to go by Pastor Jeff is because he's given authority just by the basis of how he looks. I don't get any authority. I got to put bishop in front of my title so that I get some authority in the space and get some credence and get some respect out in the world. And even that doesn't suggest that I'll be respected. Y'all saw that pastor that just got arrested when he called the police. He was the pastor. He called the police. The title was supposed to insulate him in some way. It did not. He's the one that got arrested for people trespassing on his own land. But there you go. I see Ross.
I think that's important though, and we got to embrace that reality. It goes back to this whiteness conversation. Realize that Black Lives Matter is the first civil rights movement in the Black community that doesn't spawn out of the church. So with that being the reality, that helps us to know that every impactful change we've made as a culture was a result of leadership and power in the church, because we didn't have power anywhere else. So it is important for us to even understand that in whiteness, to be able to say, I go to a black church, implies that there is power here given to black people. So it is, where it can seem overbearing, it is just as overbearing as the first time you get a chance to drive and you've been riding in your mama's car, in your mama's direction, under your mama's auspices. The first time you get out there, you trying to go as fast as you think you possibly can. You're trying to bend every rule until you have to merge on the 285 the first time by yourself. And you realize this thing is a little bit more complicated than I thought it was. But it is necessary, simply because once we leave the church, in most circumstances, we don't have any power. So we're going to have church as long as we can. We're going to shout as hard as we can. I'm going to make sure you understand everything I've researched in this message for the next 2 hours. You're going to listen. We're going to sing. Why? Because after this, I can't do this for another 7 days. So while we minimize it, it is a result of whiteness that has put us in a position where we had to maximize our titles because our names don't matter everywhere else.
You're right on.
Yeah.
And I would say too that it's a product of whiteness that this is the first movement founded outside of the church, because it's founded in part by people who weren't welcome in churches. And so when we talk about whiteness, we're not even just talking about racism. We're talking about all the other isms and phobias and social injustices which serve to prop up white supremacy, of which racism is one, maybe the primary, but is one. And so to go back to the original question, and to go back to the congruence of Christianity and whiteness, like if Christianity is oppressing the same people that whiteness is oppressing, then why are we convinced there's any difference between the two? And I think, and so if it is indeed that, you know, LGBTQ activists are the ones who started Black Lives Matter, then what belief system was being subscribed to that made them feel so ostracized as to say the church can't do this anymore? We have to do outside the church. And I submit that is still whiteness, and it is still whiteness that you know, keeps women from being in churches regardless of race. It is whiteness that has created what womanist scholar Cheryl B. Anderson called the mythic norm, which is the normative, straight, male, white. I think Angela Davis or Audre Lorde, I can't remember which one, added skinny, Christian, like all of these things to be like, this is the ideal human. And so and I think that's because whiteness, as in white light, like white light is a light that you cannot see because it has consumed every single color, every single shade, every single permutation of humanity goes into white light, and then you can't see it. And so that is what whiteness is. Like every permutation of humanity, every kind of diversity that doesn't fit into this mythic norm then is consumed and is made then invisible. And so I think we just have to, going back to my original point about like whiteness and Christianity, I think we have to decide for ourselves whether the baking of that cake, whether the ingredients of empire and Christianity and opportunism and whiteness and whatever, was it a chemical change, meaning that what has been done can be undone? You know, you can't take a cake and then be like, there's the egg, there's the flour, there's the water, it's a cake. You can't separate it out once it's been baked. So is it a chemical change where the fundamental structure of it has been changed unrecognizably and we need to stop eating cake and start eating cookies? Or is it a physical change? Is it water that's melted that we can refreeze? Is it water that has been changed that we can then undo? That is a chemical change. Maybe I got those mixed up, but you get my point. Like, is it something that cannot be undone? It's been a long time since biology. I thought I had it. But and I'm not sure. You know, are we? I'm not sure.
So I want to.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead and say that, and then we're gonna pivot.
I'm being repetitive, but I feel like I need to say it again. James Cone said, "If your God is white, kill God." Because any God who participates in the oppression of humanity as opposed to the freeing of humanity is not God and deserves to die. That's all. Go ahead.
No, I think that's worth repeating. So thank you for bringing it up again.
Yes.
You know, you just brought something up, Grayson, that was like very important to me when we talk about the conflation of Christianity and whiteness. I once read up on the history of General Tso's chicken. I love General Tso's chicken from the Chinese food place. All right.
It's so good.
That's one of my favorite dishes to get when I go get Chinese food. But when I read up on it, I learned that the General Tso's chicken that we eat here in the States is drastically different from the original that was created in China. Right. It's a totally different type of dish in China because the person that originally created it in a particular context. And then when it made its way over here, it was changed into something else to appeal to the palate of the American sense of taste, right? So what we have here as General Tso's chicken is drastically different from what General Tso's chicken was at its infancy. I think the same thing about white Christianity. And that's why I have a problem with people who want to give white people credit for Christianity wholesale. Christianity started as something else. White people took it and changed the ingredients to appeal to the palate of white people who needed the power that they could not control. And now we have this conflation of Christianity and whiteness that a lot of even black people think white people can take credit for Christianity. No, they can't. They just changed the ingredients. So we can't give white people the power over Christianity when they didn't originate it in the first place.
So what you... Sorry.
Go ahead.
So what you're saying is whiteness is to Christianity as Elvis Presley is to Little Richard.
Boom. Boom. Right? Or Chuck Berry.
There you go.
Yeah, Chuck Berry.
Right? Yeah. So that's exactly what I'm saying. So I think when we talk about this conflation of Christianity and whiteness, we need to address the fact that this is not the original recipe. Like, we should not practice it as it is, as it was handed to us. But if we go back to the original recipe, I think what we'll find is there's something much more life-giving. When we look at who Jesus actually was and what Jesus actually said and did, we'll see that there is something beautiful in that whiteness tarnished and destroyed. But we can come together and give it life again if we get back to the original recipe. So this is what I would like to do. I would like us to start kind of bringing this to a close, and Nikki's going to give us our final words. So I want everybody to just take 2 or 3 minutes, talk to us about how can we address whiteness moving forward in our culture to make American culture better. What does that look like for us to address it as we move forward to make it better? So I want to do it like this. Let's go Karima, Grayson, Kervance, Myron, and then Nikki's gonna close us out. Karima, Grayson, Kervance, Myron, Nikki, close us out. Karima, what can we do to make it better?
What can I do to make it better? I'm not here to make something better. I'm here to transform. And so I want to do away with that. And whatever you do not feed does not grow. So in my own consciousness, if I have to ask someone for power, then I perceive that I don't have it. If I have to ask someone for freedom, then I perceive that I don't have it. So I'm not doing that anymore because I already have everything that I need. I already am powerful. I already am free. So I am just standing in what I already am, period. So I'm not out here, begging for, see that my life matters. No, I already know that my life matters. So while you're trying to figure out if you were going to decide if my life matters, I'm going to move on because I know that it does. So for me, that means standing in who I already am. And the lie and the myth was having me think and perceive myself otherwise. So I am, because at some point you have to, if I'm going to make something better, then I'm still starting with the root of the thing, and I'm trying to change this root. No, I'm not here to do that, right? So that's put aside. That does not even pertain to me anymore. And it never did. It never should have, and that was a lie. So what I'm doing to move forward is I am empowering. I'm reminding other people, beginning with the children, of their power. You came here in power. You are clothed in power. Stand in that. You don't have to ask anybody for it. You already have it, right? You're like Dorothy. You already are home, honey. Just click your little heels and wake up. So that's what I'm doing moving forward. Reminding people of who they already are, who they were created to be. And you ain't got to ask nobody for it. Just go on and be.
Go on and be. That was sweet. Like, I just need that on repeat. Can you repeat the question, Christian?
What can we do to improve moving forward in and how we address whiteness?
At my lowest and like most angry moments, I think just abolishing the United States of America, but that may be a little unrealistic. So maybe more practically, seeing that is not likely to happen tomorrow, maybe in November, we'll see. But for me, I think it is a constant addressing of whiteness. Like, I think to make it better. And I agree with Karima, like, we need to transform, we need to reform, we need to revolutionize. But to keep within the language of the question, for me, it's a constant addressing of it and making sure to address it. Whiteness is the elephant in every room. It is the reason why the room exists in the first place, and so we need to address it. And so I think it's just any time that the opportunity arises, I think it's doing a land recognition. Like at the beginning, I should have done this at our sermon last week, Christian, but there's a tradition in Canada, not a fairly recent tradition, of beginning every like public gathering, speech, sermon, etc. Anytime you have a platform to be like, I want to acknowledge that we are doing this on Cherokee land or Choctaw land or Sioux land, just to remind ourselves that like the room that we're standing in is a house that whiteness built upon the corpses of others. And so is the question to burn the house down and exhume those bodies and give those dry bones life? I don't know. Is the question to, all right, we've built this massive, grandiose, grotesque house. Let's invite as many people as we can into it because we're here now. What do we do? Maybe it is. But for me, I try to, whatever house I have built for myself and am building for myself, I try to reduce the number of corpses upon which my house is being built and invite as many people into it, which means that I have to open myself up to the ability to invite people, which means that I reduce my proximity to whiteness as much as possible. And I don't mean getting tan and sunburned because that happens too easily, but reducing my proximity to it in responding to people with empathy, responding to people with listening and understanding and curiosity, not retreating to the prepackaged answers of, but all lives matter, or but other countries, but the whataboutism and the I'm not, you are, now what? And so it's choosing at every juncture I can humanity over adherence to proximity to subscription to whiteness, and it's a lifelong journey. And so I think the journey of becoming more like Jesus is the journey of becoming less like Columbus, the journey of becoming less like George Washington, the journey of becoming less like Donald Trump. And however I can do that, one part of it is by being out and proud as gay. That is a rebuke of whiteness. That is a rebuke of Constantinian Christianity. Joy, laughter, authenticity, dancing, taking delight in our being as God takes delight in our being. To go back to you, Karima, that is making it better. Because any work that we must do for the world, we must do within ourselves. So if we are to make a guilty world, then we operate out of white guilt. If we are to make a fragile world, then we operate out of white fragility. But if we are to make a loving world, then we are the raw materials upon which that world is built and from which that world is created. So I'm trying to make this material love, to make within my own personal world love, so that the exterior world can match that.
The American Psychological Association has coined the term prefrontal cortex. When they diagnose how the brain works, they state that prefrontal cortex is the inability for people who have addictions to be able to pause. One of the main challenges with people who have addictions, they don't have a Selah moment in their brain that allows them to pause and ponder. Congruently, when I first started eating and expanded my palate, I had duck. And when I tasted duck, when they got ready to serve it, the person that I was eating with, to create some parallel and some comfort, said, "Don't worry, it tastes just like chicken." I found out that as African Americans, because of our comfort with chicken, anytime we had something that had a similar preparation, a similar process, and a similar presentation, we would calm others by saying it tastes just like chicken. When you think about Christianity and whiteness in America, if they are equatable, then you would have to realize that Christianity has been adjusted and differentiates itself from other religions because the Savior, Jesus Christ, who we hold in high esteem, is not dead like others. He resurrected himself and received all power. If the parallel of whiteness to Christianity is the same, then the parallel of differentiation in whiteness has to be in the ability for us to understand that whiteness in its crucifixion has powerless taste on textures that are served at the same table. And when you start to realize that we have now in whiteness tried to force people to believe that it tastes just like chicken, that you're forcing people to understand that there is no differentiation that can make you feel comfortable, I have to say that you have all power in not being able to taste the differences in other people's lives, other people's backgrounds, and other people's circumstance. I would have to diagnose whiteness with prefrontal cortex because it does not have the ability to pause and see outside of its own taste, see outside of its own circumstance, and see outside of its reality that everything doesn't taste like chicken. You minimize the texture and the preparation of the people at the table in your circumstance when you try to make them taste the way you want to make them taste, and realize that whiteness, unlike Christianity, has a differentiation of power in a person that wants other people to operate in power within themselves. And whiteness has the dynamic that says, if you don't taste, if you've not been cooked up by me and I didn't serve you, you have no power. We've got to now stop, pause, realize that whiteness is not Christianity, chicken is not duck, and we've got to now take whiteness off the table, put Christ back on the throne, and allow all of us to understand that we equally have power to be successful, to live, to thrive, and to operate at our optimum potential.
My God, Ross, that was so good. White is not wrong and it does not sit on a throne. I love it, sir. I love it. But listen, this is what I would add. You know, we got to have a paradigm shift. We have read for so many years that Christ has come. Though our sins be as scarlet, he shall make us white as snow. I think that's where we need to have the paradigm shift. White is not the ultimate reality of what we want to be. Christ didn't come to make us white. I think Christ came to make us original. We have treated Christ's coming as bleach, right? That it makes us white. But we need to treat it like Tide, that it gets the stains out, but the colors won't run. I want to tell you folks that God made you in his image, and he said that is good. God has made you to be original. You have got divine in you. No matter what you look like and where you come from, you've got divine in you. And Christ came to restore you to the divinity that's already on the inside. It's not bleach, it's Tide. It gets the stains out and the colors won't run.
I don't even know what to say after that. Yes. Tide, not bleach. Tide, not bleach. Myron, all of you. So as I've been thinking about our conversation here, whiteness, from what I am hearing from our conversation, whiteness seeks to control all the available power. And it does it by elevating and valuing power from white people and devaluing and squashing power from anybody else. So however white people manifest power, that's what we're going to hold up as good and the power that should be valued. And the power that is manifested by anyone else, we're going to squash. And by squashing it, we control it. And so I think that because I think it's so appropriate that we are recording this on July 4th, because whiteness has been infused into everything in America. I think the way that we make it right, the way that we make it better, is by questioning everything. We have to look at everything and see if the whiteness filter is on. And if the whiteness filter is on, we need to take it off and see what's really there. It shows up in marching band. It shows up in our Sunday school rooms. It shows up in our boardrooms. It shows up in our classrooms. It shows up in our justice systems. It shows up in our police departments. It shows up in our government rooms where laws are made. It shows up in our pulpits. And it is not only in white space where it shows up, because it has been so infused in everything that we have built. And so for me, the way that I seek to understand, dismantle, reveal whiteness is by assuming it is present and trying to name it and then get rid of it. So that's where I am. If a phrase pops out of your mouth and you go, wait a minute, where does that phrase come from? Look it up, find out. If you're sitting in a room and there is no diversity in that meeting room, fix it. Question everything. Lean into curiosity. That's what I got.
I just think this is the greatest show on the planet. And I'm so glad to do Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality with you all. Last thing I want to say as we sign off, arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor.
Yes.
Peace out.
See you folks.